Mike Bibby was a point guard first and foremost, setting up his teammates throughout his career, helping his teams improve wherever he went. And Mike Bibby also knew the right moment when to get his shots, often hitting many of them in clutch moments. On top of this, never demanding to be option number one on the team. Mike Bibby simply made teams better. This is a look back on Mike Bibby's career. Mike Bibby is the son of former NBA player and NBA champion in Henry Bibby, and would follow in his footsteps playing basketball. Bibby would grow up in Arizona and go to Shadow Mountain High School in Phoenix, Arizona, where he would hone his craft and help his school win an Arizona State championship, along the way becoming highly recruited, earning many accolades like First Team Parade All-American, McDonald's All-American, and even winning Mr. Basketball USA over Kobe Bryant, who was the runner-up. Now, with the ability to essentially go anywhere he wanted, Mike Bibby would decide to stay close to home and go to Arizona to play for Hall of Fame head coach Lute Olson. Mike Bibby would be joining a talented Arizona team with multiple future NBA players in Michael Dickerson, Miles Simon, AJ Bramlett, and Jason Terry, with no seniors on the roster as well. Now, despite all the high-end talent around Bibby, he would find himself being the starting point guard all year right away as a freshman, being the third option on the team offensively, helping see Mike Bibby in his freshman year average 13.5 points, 3.2 rebounds, and 5.2 assists a night, earning Pac-10 Freshman of the Year, and helping Arizona along the way go 25-9, getting a 4th seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, Arizona would go on to win its first 2 matchups against South Alabama and the College of Charleston, with Bibby being second on the team in scoring in both the NCAA tournament games. In the Sweet 16, Arizona would get a matchup against 1-seeded Kansas, who were also filled as with NBA players just like Arizona, and Paul Pierce, Rafe LaFrance, Scott Pollard, Billy Thomas, Jack Vaughn, and Ryan Robertson. Now, the whole game would be a back and forth tight one going late into the game, where Mike Bibby would put the Wildcats up 3 points with 2 big free throws late in the game, but with time left, Kansas had a chance to tie it. Kansas would get multiple attempts, but Rafe LaFrance would ultimately miss the shot at the buzzer beater, helping the Wildcats advance, pulling off the upset of the tournament at the time, with Bibby leading the way with 21 points. Now, entering into the Elite Eight now, Arizona would get a matchup against Providence, who had upset several teams just like Arizona had to get to where they were, but were also talented with future NBA players in Austin Crozier, Jamel Thomas, Ruben Garce, and God Shamgod, helping see Arizona in another tight game where they couldn't even find a winner in regulation. But in overtime, Arizona would get the lead just large enough and hold on to it just long enough in defeating Providence, going to the Final Four, where they would get a matchup against North Carolina, who were led by the dynamic trio of Vince Carter, Shamond Williams, and Anton Jamison. Now, Carter and Jamison would play phenomenally this game, but Arizona managed to shut down Williams. This, along with 20 points from Mike Bibby in the game, the Arizona Wildcats would win, making it to the national championship game. Now, in the national championship game, Arizona would be facing Kentucky with 6 future NBA players, led in particular by Ron Mercer and Derek Anderson. Arizona, like the whole entire tournament, would find itself in another tight game against Kentucky, with the game being all tied up after regulation. But in overtime, Arizona would finally pull away from Kentucky, winning the NCAA tournament as a 4 seed with no seniors on the roster. Mike Bibby in the championship game would score 19 points, only keeping up a strong NCAA tournament along the way, where he would make the NCAA All-Tournament team after winning the title. After a strong tournament, many were expecting Bibby to turn pro, but he elected to return for his sophomore year to improve his game more and in order to be more ready when the time was right to go pro. On top of this, there was a good chance that Arizona might repeat as national champions again. Now, in his sophomore season, Mike Bibby would not disappoint, improving upon his game all around, seeing his numbers increase to 17.2 points, 3 rebounds, and 5.7 assists a night, helping Arizona dominate the regular season, going 30-5. Because of this, Mike Bibby would be named Pac-10 Player of the Year and would end up finishing 3rd in the Wooden Award. Mike Bibby would find himself and Arizona entering the NCAA tournament this time as the number 1 seed with a big target on their back. Where in the NCAA tournament, Arizona would find itself winning its first 3 games rather comfortably over Nicholls State, Illinois State, and Maryland. Entering into the Elite Eight, the Wildcats would get a matchup against the Utah Utes, who were led by Andre Miller, Michael Doliak, and Hanno Motolo. Against Utah, Arizona as a whole would all of a sudden go cold from the floor, in large parts from Utah's defense, only shooting 28% from the floor as a team, resulting in Utah winning rather soundly 76-51. Mike Bibby on top of this would struggle this game just like the most of the team, going 3 of 15 from the floor with 7 points. But despite his personal struggles this game, he had put on a display all season, proving he was an NBA caliber player. And Mike Bibby would turn pro after his sophomore year, with him being a highly sought after player. Mike Bibby would end up being selected in the 1998 NBA draft, second overall to the Vancouver Grizzlies. Bibby would be joining a Grizzly team in their early years of existence who were struggling, but with Bibby and fellow teammate Sharif Abdur-Rahim, the Grizzlies were hoping the two could turn things around in Vancouver. On a Grizzlies team lacking talent, Mike Bibby would be thrown into the starting point guard role right away, and he would excel, becoming the second best player on the team, where he would average 13.2 points, 6.5 assists, and 2.7 rebounds a night, and for his efforts he would be named to the all-rookie first team in the NBA. But Vancouver would struggle in this lockout-shortened season, only going 8-42. And in the offseason, the Grizzlies, knowing they needed to improve rather quickly, would acquire Mike Bibby's former teammate at Arizona to help out in Michael Dickerson. Because of this, Bibby would find himself being the third option on the offense, yet everything ran through him, so his numbers would improve again to 14.5 points, 8.1 assists, and 3.7 rebounds a night. Now this year, Bibby also twice tied Vancouver's franchise record for steals in a single basketball game with 7. Mike Bibby along the way would help see the Grizzlies improve, but still struggle overall, going 22-60, missing the playoffs. And as the next season came along, Mike Bibby would improve upon his play again, averaging 15.9 points, 8.4 assists, and 3.1 rebounds. But Bibby's play was not enough again to help improve the team's overall play, as the Grizzlies were stuck in the bottom of the league again, going 23-59. Next season, the Grizzlies would decide to relocate to Memphis because of the overall lack of success in Vancouver. However, Mike Bibby would be traded in the offseason, never seeing a chance to play for the Memphis Grizzlies. Mike Bibby would be traded by the Grizzlies with Brent Price to the Sacramento Kings for Nick Anderson and then fan favorite of the Kings in Jason Williams. Mike Bibby would be joining a Kings team that was winning and looking to win it all now. The Kings were a well-rounded team led by Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic, and Doug Christie rounding out the starting five with help from Hedo Turkoglu as the sixth man. Now, since Mike Bibby was no longer having to be the focal point on his team in the offense, his averages would drop, but would still be respectable in his new role, setting up his great teammates, averaging 13.7 points, 5 assists, and 2.8 rebounds. Now, Bibby's play would help the Kings dominate the West this year, going 61-21, getting the number 1 seed. Mike Bibby would step up his play in the playoffs, helping see the Kings handle the Jazz and the Mavericks in round 1 and 2, helping set up a Western Conference Finals matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers, of course, would be led by Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal, but the Kings were the top seed in the West for a reason, battling with the Lakers the whole entire series. And the highlight of the series for Mike Bibby would be in Game 5, where he would help put the Kings up 3-2 over the Lakers with a last-second shot to win the game. However, the rest of the way out this series, it would be marred by a lot of controversy. In Game 6, it would be a tight one, but referees would award the Lakers 27 free throws in the fourth quarter, while the Kings would only take a total of 25 free throws the entire game, which was allegedly fixed according to a former NBA ref in Tim Donaghy. This would help extend the series to the 7th game, and in Game 7, the Kings would keep it tight, but would ultimately run out of steam in overtime, with the Lakers winning the series, where the Lakers would go on to win the NBA championship this year. Mike Bibby this playoffs run would see his game take a jump to the next level, where he would average 20.3 points, 5 assists, and 3.8 rebounds. Next season, Bibby would struggle with injuries, also struggling to find the playoff form he had with the year prior, but would still put up respectable numbers in 55 games where he would average 15.9 points, 5.2 assists, and 2.7 rebounds. Now the Kings, despite missing Bibby for the time, would stay afloat with great play from the sixth man in Bobby Jackson, filling in his role rather nicely, helping see the Sacramento Kings go 59-23, getting the 2 seed. Now in round 1, they would handle the Jazz again, who were aging, getting a second round matchup following against the Dallas Mavericks. Now the Dallas Mavericks were led by Dirk Nowitzki, Michael Finley, Nick Van Exel, and Steve Nash. The Mavericks and Kings matched up well against one another, with wins being split every other game despite Webber going down with an injury in Game 2. But the Mavericks would hold on to win in 7 games with big performances from Nick Van Exel and Dirk Nowitzki. Mike Bibby's play would dip slightly this postseason and would average 12.7 points, 5 assists, and 1.9 rebounds along the way. Now in the offseason, the Kings would trade away Turkoglu as a part of a 3-team trade for Brad Miller. He would be a very helpful addition without the Kings even knowing at the time, because Chris Webber would ultimately miss a fair amount of time this year due to injury. Now without Webber, Bibby would have to step up his play, and he did, averaging 18.4 points a night, 5.4 assists, and 3.5 rebounds, and in the process helped the Kings stay afloat with an injured Webber, where the Kings would go 55-27, getting a 4 seed. In round 1, the Sacramento Kings would get a rematch against the Dallas Mavericks and the team that sent them home the prior year. But the Mavs this go around did not have Nick Van Exel, and Webber was fully healthy this whole entire time. The series would have a lot of close games, with the Mavericks having opportunities to win the game at the buzzer multiple times, but would end up missing them, helping see the Kings win the series in a misleading 5 games. In round 2, the Kings would get a matchup against the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were the number 1 seed, led by Kevin Garnett, Latrell Sprewell, and Sam Cassell. The series would be a tight one overall, with Kevin Garnett willing the Timberwolves to victories, and the series would end up going to the 7th game, where it looked like it could be anyone's game the entire way. The Minnesota Timberwolves would take the lead late in the game, but the Kings would have a chance to tie it at the buzzer, and Chris Webber would ultimately miss the shot, sending the Kings home. Mike Bibby this postseason would play well overall and would see himself average 20 points, 7 assists, and 4.2 rebounds. Now entering the next season, the Kings would be without Vlade Divac, who left in free agency, and that would end up not being the only change as the season went along for the Kings. The Kings would begin to dismantle their team for the future. Chris Webber would end up being traded away to the 76ers for minimal return. On top of this, Doug Christie would be traded for Cuttino Mobley. As a result of all the moves the Kings made, the team was officially in the hands of Mike Bibby and Peja Stojakovic. Now Mike Bibby would end up getting more touches, seeing his numbers improve to 19.6 points, 6.8 assists, and 4.2 rebounds, helping see the Kings go 50-32, getting a 6 seed, and also getting a matchup against the Supersonics, who were led by Ray Allen and Rashard Lewis. Mike Bibby and Peja Stojakovic would play well this series, but the new-look Kings were missing the players of the year prior, seeing the Sonics win the series in 5 games rather easily. Mike Bibby would average 19.6 points, 6.6 assists, and 3.4 rebounds this series against the Sonics. The Sacramento Kings in the offseason would only continue its downward spiral, losing Cuttino Mobley in free agency to the Clippers, only weakening the team further. And after a mixed start to the regular season, the Kings would end up trading away Peja Stojakovic for Ron Artest, helping him get a fresh start after the Malice at the Palace incident in Indiana. After all the moves, the Kings were fully led by Mike Bibby now, helping see his numbers and scoring increase up to 21.1 points a night to go with 5.4 assists and 2.9 rebounds. Mike Bibby would lead the Sacramento Kings to a 44-38 record, barely making the playoffs as an 8 seed, getting a matchup against the Spurs led by Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili. Now the Kings would hang around in this series longer than expected with outbreak performances from the likes of Bonzi Wells, but ultimately it wasn't enough against the Spurs juggernaut, losing in 6 games, where Bibby over the series would average 16.7 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 5.2 assists. Next year, Bibby would go back to playing as the third option on the team to Ron Artest and Kevin Martin, who would have a breakout year this season. Henceforth, Bibby's numbers would take a slight dip to 17.1 points, 4.7 assists, and 3.2 rebounds, and the Kings would be slipping all together as a whole even further this year, going 33-49, missing the playoffs. Mike Bibby would enter next season under a very similar role as the year prior, but would be battling injuries early on, missing time. With this and the Kings not competing, the Kings would ultimately decide to trade Mike Bibby away. Bibby would be traded by the Sacramento Kings to the Atlanta Hawks for Anthony Johnson, Tyronn Lue, Sheldon Williams, Lorenzen Wright, and a 2008 second-round pick that would go on to be Sean Singletary. The Hawks team Mike Bibby would be joining was led by Josh Smith and Joe Johnson, with the young up-and-coming Al Horford. Now Mike Bibby along the way would help improve the team and provide stability at the point guard. This season with the Hawks and the Kings, Mike Bibby would average 13.9 points, 6 assists, and 3.3 rebounds. Now with Bibby's addition to the Atlanta Hawks, they would improve, going 37-45, sneaking into the NBA playoffs as an 8 seed. In round 1, the Hawks would get a matchup against the Boston Celtics led by Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Rajon Rondo. The Celtics entered the series as heavy favorites, but would struggle against the Hawks, specifically at Atlanta, to the surprise of everyone, considering the Hawks barely made the playoffs and the Celtics were title favorites. The Atlanta Hawks would go on to win all of their home games, forcing a Game 7, but would ultimately get blown out in the final game against the Celtics. The Celtics would go on to win the NBA championship this year. And over this series, Mike Bibby would average 10.3 points, 3.1 assists, and 3.1 rebounds. Next season would be a healthy one for Mike Bibby, seeing a similar role to the year prior with the Atlanta Hawks. Now Mike Bibby would go on to average 14.9 points, 5 assists, and 3.5 rebounds along the way. With Mike Bibby being around full-time this year for the Atlanta Hawks, they would only continue to improve, going 47-35, getting a 4 seed in the East. In round 1, the Hawks would face the Miami Heat led by Dwayne Wade in his prime of his playing days. Now Wade would continue his impressive regular season form into this series, but as true to most of the season, his teammates couldn't provide enough support, resulting in the Atlanta Hawks winning the series in 7 games. Now awaiting the Hawks in round 2 was LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, where LeBron would just plain and simple overpower the Hawks altogether, sweeping them. Now over the postseason, Mike Bibby would see similar numbers to the regular season, with 13.2 points, 4.2 assists, and 3.4 rebounds. In the offseason, the Hawks would only continue to improve upon their team with the addition of Jamal Crawford and drafting Jeff Teague. Because of the additions at guard, Mike Bibby would take on a smaller role, seeing his averages dip to 9.1 points, 3.9 assists, and 2.3 rebounds. But with the Hawks adding more talent and Horford only improving as growing with age, the record would as well, going 53-29, getting a 3 seed for the Hawks, in a matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks in round 1. Now the Bucks would be led by Brandon Jennings, John Salmons, and Andrew Bogut. However, Bogut was not healthy and couldn't play this series, creating in what most thought would be an easy win for the Atlanta Hawks this series. But the Bucks would provide resistance with big games and performances from Brandon Jennings and Salmons this series, pushing it to 7 games, where the Hawks would ultimately take control finally of the series and win convincingly. In round 2, the Atlanta Hawks would get a matchup against the Orlando Magic led by Dwight Howard, Rashard Lewis, Vince Carter, and Jameer Nelson. And the Hawks would find it very difficult to slow down any one of these guys, resulting in the Magic sweeping the Hawks altogether. Entering the next season, the Hawks would have largely the same team, but were not doing quite as well the year prior, where mid-season the Hawks would decide to change things up. The Atlanta Hawks would decide to trade Mike Bibby with Jordan Crawford, Maurice Evans, and a 2011 first-round pick that would go on to beat Chris Singleton to the Washington Wizards for Hilton Armstrong and Kurt Heinrich. Mike Bibby was now on a struggling Wizards team where he didn't quite fit the team timeline all that well. Mike Bibby would only end up playing in 2 games for the Washington Wizards before negotiating a way to get bought out to join a contender, and the Wizards would agree after Mike Bibby decided to give up his entire next year's salary. After Bibby would clear waivers, he would join the Miami Heat in hopes of winning an NBA title, as the Miami Heat at the time were the favorites to win it all, led by LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. Mike Bibby would join the squad, getting the starting point guard spot to end the season with the Miami Heat. Along the way this season, over 3 teams, Mike Bibby would average 8.6 points, 3.3 assists, and 2.4 rebounds. Now Bibby would end up helping the Heat end the season strong, going 58-24, getting a 2 seed in the playoffs. Where in the NBA playoffs, the Miami Heat would absolutely run through the entire Eastern Conference, winning every series in 5 games over quality teams like the 76ers with Andre Iguodala, Elton Brand, and Drew Holiday, the Boston Celtics with Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Rajon Rondo, and the Chicago Bulls with Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, and Carlos Boozer. Mike Bibby was officially in the finals now after this dominant run by the Heat in the East to face none other than the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks would be led by Dirk Nowitzki, Jason Terry, Tyson Chandler, and Jason Kidd, and many thought the Heat would continue the strong postseason they had so far against the Dallas Mavericks, but Dirk and his teammates had other thoughts. The Mavericks would go on to steal a couple games late with big plays from Nowitzki, and the Mavs team as a whole stepping up their play from the whole entire season, helping stun the Miami Heat in 6 games, causing LeBron to have to wait even longer for his first ring. Mike Bibby, over this run to the NBA Finals as the starting point guard for the Heat, would average 3.7 points, 1.2 assists, and 1.8 rebounds. And after the season, Mike Bibby was a free agent and would not be brought back with the Heat, with them favoring to go with Mario Chalmers and drafting Norris Cole. Mike Bibby would ultimately decide to join the New York Knicks as the backup point guard to Baron Davis. Bibby was joining a Knicks team led by Amari Stoudemire, Tyson Chandler, and Carmelo Anthony, and Mike Bibby would step into the starter role occasionally with Baron Davis being injured. However, at one point in the season, the whole team would be bit by injuries, including Davis and Bibby at the same time, helping clear the way for the sensation that was Jeremy Lin and Linsanity to take over the nation. After this, Bibby would see limited playing time the rest of the season when healthy again, but because of Lin's injury late in the season, where he would have to miss the rest of the year, Bibby would find himself back in rotation. Mike Bibby on the year would average 2.6 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 2.1 assists, and the Knicks along the way, with all the injuries including Bibby's in the lockout-shortened season, would go 36-30, where the Knicks would barely make it into the playoffs and face in the first round Bibby's former team in the Miami Heat, where the Heat would be too much to handle for the Knicks, even frustrating him so much that Amari Stoudemire decided to punch a fire extinguisher, causing him to get injured. The Miami Heat would ultimately win this series in 5 games and go on to win the NBA championship, which had to sting a lot for Mike Bibby. Mike Bibby this series against the Heat would average 5.4 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 2.6 assists. In the offseason, Mike Bibby's contract was up, and the Knicks would bring in Jason Kidd and Raymond Felton to play point guard instead, thus ending Mike Bibby's career. Over Mike Bibby's 14-year NBA career, he would average 14.7 points, 3.1 rebounds, and 5.5 assists. Mike Bibby will be remembered as the player coming up in clutch moments, whether it was in the NBA playoffs or the NCAA tournament, where he won a ring with Arizona. On top of being clutch, Bibby knew how to pick his spots and better the team all around him, playing a great complementary point guard, helping set up his long list of talented teammates along the way. Mike Bibby simply knew how to play basketball the right way. Thanks for watching this video on Mike Bibby's career, and if you want to see any future videos on any random players, leave it in the comments below and I may or may not decide to do a video on them, who knows. Thanks again for watching. This has been Skid Denver.